The Bitcoin country El Salvador is now not allowed to buy any new Bitcoins and is currently facing heavy criticism from the International Monetary Fund. This is what's being said in the new publications. They're talking about a Bitcoin ban, and people are totally freaking out. In fact, now that I have recorded the video, there has been confirmation from the blog trainer, and there is a CNN article about it below, which also says yes, Bitcoin purchases must be stopped, so no speculation. I did say in the video, if you watch it now, that it is not yet 100% safe, but it seems that it is now 100% safe. We need to look at what is behind this, whether Bitcoin is really being banned or whether there is something else entirely behind it. Because we have just learned that there are apparently 94 countries around the world that have also received the same letter as El Salvador or the same notification. And here it says, if you want to keep getting loans, then you can't buy any Bitcoin. This could also explain why, in recent years, specifically since 2021, so few countries have invested in Bitcoin. We're seeing a massive conspiracy against Bitcoin and the International Monetary Fund, which also explains why not just El Salvador is under pressure, but other countries as well. We're going to look into what's really going on, whether Bitcoin is actually already banned in El Salvador or if it's going to be banned. Because I'm currently in El Salvador myself, and I've already received tons of messages asking, hey Mark, what's going on now? El Salvador has not only abolished Bitcoin as an official currency, but now there's also a ban on buying any more Bitcoins. We know that El Salvador was the #1 Bitcoin country, and in my opinion, it still is. So, we'll take a look later at what that looks like in reality. But then there was, first of all, the pressure from the International Monetary Fund. They had a loan of $1.4 billion, and that was only granted if certain conditions were accepted. This means that pressure is being exerted by the International Monetary Fund. The country is being blackmailed, so to speak, and this must be clearly stated openly. So, the International Monetary Fund is always shooting down Bitcoin, saying it's not money. But on the flip side, when a country actually uses Bitcoin as a payment method or as money, like it's being done in El Salvador, they say, no, you have to get rid of it. It can't be an official currency anymore. So, that's what we know. It's clearly established that it can no longer be an official currency. It can only be used voluntarily. Additionally, the Chibo wallet is supposed to be discontinued, and some minor things in the regulations are set to be adjusted. And that's basically what's publicly known so far. And now today, a shocking report came in, and I'm going to read it here from Cointelegraph. It says here that the International Monetary Fund plans to restrict El Salvador's purchase of Bitcoin as part of an expanded $1.4 billion financing deal with the country. On March 3rd, the International Monetary Fund published a new request for an extended agreement under its financing facility for El Salvador. He submitted several new documents, including an update to the employee statement and a statement from his executive director for El Salvador. We're going to take a look at these documents right now because it's clearly defined that El Salvador is definitely not allowed to buy any more Bitcoin. And we'll also take a look at the bombshell, the letter or message that was sent out to 94 countries, which apparently says that many countries are not allowed to buy Bitcoin. And that is also the reason why adoption has declined somewhat here. Because of course, if you are a developing country and you don't get IMF loans, then you are already in a difficult position because you simply need the money. On the other hand, you'd actually need Bitcoin too, but maybe cash is more important than Bitcoin. I don't know. But we'll take a closer look at that in a bit because this is absolutely hot right now. And now, one thing you really need to pay attention to is that it's not the case yet that Bitcoin purchases are officially banned from El Salvador's side. That means El Salvador has a Bitcoin wallet overall. Here, they have Bitcoin. Bukele posted yesterday, hey, here's a border dip. I don't know if he actually said border dip, but yesterday they bought another 5 Bitcoin. They've actually been buying a bit more Bitcoin lately. So you can see, they have Bitcoin now. They bought like 5 Bitcoin in one day. Then I think it was 7 Bitcoin on another day. And at one point, it was even 11 or 12 Bitcoin in a single day. Sure, some have said that these are just shifts or something like that. These aren't official purchases, they're just transfers and so on. So there are definitely going to be some purchases in there. It could very well be that if they bought 12 Bitcoin, they were just shifting Bitcoin from other wallets into the public wallet, and then they declared that as a purchase or something like that. Could be, I don't know. I don't have any details on that. In any case, we see that the stacks keep going up, and Bukele bought more yesterday. And now there are reports, and many have written that buying Bitcoin is now banned in El Salvador. Here, we need to make a distinction. New conditions and basically an adjustment are going to be published. And we're going to take a look at this adjustment because if Bukele accepts it, and I assume it still needs to be signed or confirmed, if he accepts it, that's probably the basic condition for new loans. So if El Salvador wants new loans now, then the purchases have to be put on hold as well, because that was also very, very unclearly defined in the original documents. There was this word, and it was confined. And then all the people argued about what confined means, because confined means something like restricted in German. And some people assumed that confined already means a ban, while others thought, okay, maybe it just means you can't buy too many Bitcoin, like not an unlimited amount. And there were really big discussions about this, and that's why it was unclear for a long time what was going to happen with the Bitcoin purchases. That means that it was quite clear that Bitcoin would be abolished as an official means of payment, but because the clause still said confined, the Bitcoin community really, I would say, discussed it to death. Some said, yes, it will be banned. Some said, no, it will not be banned. And confined just means something is downgraded. But Bukele has actually bought even more Bitcoin, and now there are definitely new requirements. If Bukele accepts these, then it's definitely game over, and it's very likely that Bitcoin will be banned as a purchase for the strategic reserve in El Salvador. And that's the big question now, whether he'll do it or not. So he's been saying all along that he would keep buying Bitcoin, and he's really followed through on that. It really looks like he's continuing to buy Bitcoin. I don't have direct contact with Bukele, so I can't provide any insider information on that. But I'll give you some little insights on that later, things that a lot of people here don't even know, who are just writing random stuff on Twitter or whatever. So I do have some insights here, but nothing direct from Bukele or anything like that. We're definitely going to take a look at the paragraph to see exactly what it says and what it would mean if Bukele were to accept the new conditions, and whether that would really be the end of Bitcoin in El Salvador. Here, Bitcoin News has posted the official paragraph, which has just arrived. The International Monetary Fund is trying to prevent El Salvador from buying more Bitcoin and to refrain from issuing Bitcoin-backed debt or tokens as a condition for its $1.4 billion loan agreement. So it even says here that the current loan agreement already includes these conditions. So it's not just about what they want for new loans, but it seems like the current loan agreement would be updated. It could be that if they don't accept this, somehow, the loan might get pulled back or something like that. I don't know. In any case, there's now this clause that we need to take a look at. This is the important clause that everyone is currently freaking out about. This is exactly it. I translated it into German, and it says, no voluntary accumulation of Bitcoin by the public sector. So, this is basically the headline, more or less, and then we have Bitcoin in the public sector. Bitcoin in the public sector refers to Bitcoins in all hot and cold wallets, so it doesn't matter if it's on a phone or on a hardware wallet. By the way, if you want a hardware wallet, I'll give you a link to a Dresser hardware wallet below. Super easy, simple, and secure. You can easily store Bitcoin on it. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you also get 10% off a hardware wallet. So here it says on all public Bitcoin here in hot and cold wallets that are owned or controlled by the public sector, including Skivo, the Agencia Administradora de Bitcoin, the Oficina Nacional del Bitcoin, the Commission Ejecutiva Hidroelectricia, del Rio Limpa, CEL, no idea what it is, and all other public entities and legal entities controlled by the state with majority shareholding or direct or indirect ownership. Indirect control according to the GFSM 2014, except for the deposits of Chivo customers in Bitcoin. So this is the first clause that basically says, okay, no more voluntary accumulation. And you can already see how clauses and things are being played with here again. It's just like special assets. They're not saying that Bitcoin will be banned. They're saying that voluntary accumulation will no longer be allowed. I mean, they're just turning the thing around, and that's just one of the International Monetary Fund's tricks. You really have to say that it is absolutely the lowest of the low that countries are being blackmailed here because, on the one hand, El Salvador needs the money because it is a developing country. I mean, you really have to see this. When you look around, there are perfectly paved roads everywhere like in Germany. People here sometimes live in shanties, but in my opinion, they seem happier than people in Germany. Well, I'm here in El Salvador voluntarily. It's still really cool, even though this story is happening here now. So, I would actually stay in El Salvador even if it gets completely banned here. So, even if Bukele stops buying Bitcoin, the country still has a lot to offer, and it's definitely on the rise. You also have to say that there's a lot of grassroots movement happening here. That means, even if Bukele stops buying Bitcoin later on, I can still pay with Bitcoin everywhere here in El Zonte, where I currently am, because this is happening from the bottom up. You have to say that too. So, the International Monetary Fund is definitely bottom of the barrel here. And now we get to the really important paragraph where voluntary accumulation is defined. So, voluntary accumulation of Bitcoin includes buying and mining Bitcoins and excludes the accumulation of Bitcoins. Seizure, custody, or other forms of possession by the state resulting from enforcement measures under Salvadoran law. So that means buying and Bitcoin mining is then banned. That means you can't mine Bitcoin anymore, and you can't buy Bitcoin either. I don't think Bitcoin mining is really happening much here in El Salvador anyway. There were some projects with geothermal energy and stuff like that, but I don't think they ever really got off the ground. That means that this is definitely the very critical point here, where it is said that buying and Bitcoin mining is prohibited here, and even if I have understood correctly, even if Bitcoin were to be confiscated here, then the storage would be restricted here, then you would probably have to liquidate the Bitcoin here. At least that is what I am reading here. On the other hand, we have the Bitcoin office with Max Kaiser, Stacy Herbert, and Michael Saylor was a guest with Bukele, and so on. He invites all these leaders, and I would say Bukele is a real Bitcoiner. I mean, I've never met him, but you have to give him credit because El Salvador is really the only country that currently has a Bitcoin-only focus amidst all the shitcoin nonsense going on. You really have to give Bukele a lot of credit for that. In the US, we see the whole shitcoin parade, and it's similar in other countries too. El Salvador has always had a focus on Bitcoin, and I think the difference is that this actually came from Bukele himself. It wasn't like in the US, where some people tried to orange pill Donald Trump. This whole thing really came from Bukele because he probably understood Bitcoin in some way or another. And what also suggests that this isn't going to end is that Bukele is still proudly posting about his Bitcoin. Just recently, there were about 3 days where no Bitcoin was bought, and then after those 3 days, I think he bought not just 3 Bitcoin, but even 5 or 10 Bitcoin or something like that, more than expected. Then he also posted, "Hey, did you lose trust in El Salvador? Did you think the project was failing or something like that?" That's the vibe he was putting out. So, based on Bukele's statements, tweets, and all that, you can infer that Bitcoin will continue to be bought. It could be assumed that the demand from the International Monetary Fund might not even be accepted here. What that means for El Salvador, whether that means that they will not be able to get any more loans, I do not know. It could also just be that they continue to negotiate because the IMF, let's be real, is like a gang of robbers. They want to keep a country as suppressed as possible, and then they throw in clauses like that. But there is some room for negotiation. El Salvador, they can also, for example, hey, check out what we've accomplished through Bitcoin. We also have this new AI law, and they're attracting a lot of really interesting companies here. Even titties are here in El Salvador, and so on. You can really tell that this country is making massive progress. I'm super happy to be here. I definitely don't want to be sitting in cold Germany. Not at all. Check out this awesome view I have from my rooftop terrace. Look down there. You can even see surfers way back in the distance, though you can't see it from your angle, but I can. And it's also really important to note that, because a lot of people have asked me about this, now that Bitcoin is no longer an official currency here in El Salvador, nothing has changed for me. I can still pay with Bitcoin in all the stores where I could before, even in the big supermarket chains, gas stations, and whatever else. You can still pay with Bitcoin at Super Selectos, the largest supermarket chain here. So, there's a lot of panic being spread, and often the people who complain the most are the ones who aren't even in El Salvador, but are just shooting off their mouths from somewhere else. I mean, I still see it critically. I don't think it's great or anything. I have to say that. I don't think it's cool that Bukele is, let's say, being pushed around by the IMF, but you probably have to weigh things out somehow. Bukele has also made a bit of a joke about the IMF, saying things like, hey, we don't need the International Monetary Fund because we have Bitcoin now and we're independent. But then he still went ahead and made a deal with the devil, so to speak, and a lot of people really took issue with that. But you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. Uke, unfortunately, has an entire country to manage, and it's very, very difficult to see what's really going on behind the scenes. And that's exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Here's a post from the Simply Bitcoin podcast by Nico, and it's a total bombshell. He's saying that 94 countries have loans from the International Monetary Fund. And that probably explains why so few countries have invested in Bitcoin in recent years. All these countries were recently informed, probably along with El Salvador, that they can't buy Bitcoin. For this reason, no other country has followed El Salvador's example since 2021. Something has stopped the momentum. We now have a pretty good idea of who's behind it. And you also mentioned Daniel Betton, who is well known here for his reports in the Bitcoin space. That's why. So, the first country to use Bitcoin as a currency will neither be in the West nor a developing country with an IMF loan. So, what's happening here right now is really, really exciting. So we can't expect another third world country here either. At least here, for example, in Central and South America and so on, that have IMF loans, and then adopt Bitcoin if this actually turns out to be true. So it doesn't have to be 100% true, but it definitely sounds very plausible. But at the same time, I have to say, I probably wouldn't put my hand in the fire for any politician, even though I think what Bukele is doing is pretty awesome. So things are definitely moving forward here. This is a safe country. I just have to say, for me, the quality of life here in El Salvador, even if some people might not want to believe it, is higher than in a third world country, in a developing country. But it really depends. For example, I am someone who likes, for example, the nature here, the volcanoes. I can get to the volcano on my motocross in just a few minutes, or not exactly a few minutes, but it doesn't take me long. And then I'm at the volcano. I can also ride to waterfalls. Later, we're going to hike the Boca, and we're going to do an awesome tour where we hike down into the crater for 2 hours. And then we hike back up. You can do a ton of really cool things here. The security situation is really, really good. The mood in the country is extremely good. I have fresh fruits here, the best fruit quality, avocados from my own garden, papayas, coconuts, everything from my own garden, bananas, and so on. So, independent of the whole Bitcoin story, El Salvador is just a really interesting country for me. Territorial taxation, which means that foreign income is not taxed and all sorts of things like that, and that still makes it a very attractive country, and the Bitcoin story is just the icing on the cake. Although I have to honestly say that what brought me to El Salvador is actually Bitcoin. What made me settle here in the country were the other things that I experienced over time and the positive vibe here. These are also the things that you can't, let's say, explain in factual terms, but rather just the feeling. The basic white that you simply have here. And in Germany it is depressed and Or what does depressed mean? But it is simply not a system that is going uphill. It is simply a system that is tending to hit the wall. But everyone has to decide for themselves what the best place to live is, and that can change pretty quickly. It could be that in 3 months, things change, and then I'm not interested anymore. I wouldn't have a problem moving somewhere else. So I'm not really attached to El Salvador or anything like that. But in any case, this was a little insight here in El Salvador into whether the whole thing will really be banned here because so many people have asked. We now have to wait and see what Bukele does here in the next few days, whether he buys Bitcoin or whether he doesn't buy Bitcoin. And feel free to let me know in the comments what you think about it. And if you still want to buy Bitcoin, check out 21 Bitcoin. I'm putting a link down here so you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. And with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when you buy Bitcoin. I'm signing off now, saying goodbye, with this awesome view here from El Salvador. Here's the hammock, and then I'll see you later. See you later. Peace out.